Thank you very much for joining us for this live CNBC Africa broadcast, broadcasting to 48 countries across the African continent and coming to you from the Africa Investment Forum here in Johannesburg, Sandton, South Africa. We're talking about investing in women for accelerated growth, and on my panel, I am joined by Akanwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank. We're joined by Omar Al-Gabra, he's Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade Diversification of Canada. Ibukun Awosika, Chairperson, First Bank of Nigeria. Hayat Sindhi, Goodwill Ambassador for Sciences at UNESCO and founder of the Institute of Imagination and Ingenuity. And we're joined also by Daphne Mashile-Nkosi, Chairperson of Kalahari Manganese. Thank you for joining us, and we're going into a dynamic discussion, investing in women for accelerated growth. President Adesina, I'm going to start with you. The motto for the African Development Bank, building today, a better Africa tomorrow. The role of women in your vision, sir.
Well, let me start off by saying, from a personal example, I wouldn't be who I am today without my wife. And Grace is several times smarter than myself. And when I was Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, I used to tell President Jonathan that Grace and I have so much debate at home about policies that if I can survive the Grace test, I can survive anything in cabinet. That just tells you that we've got to listen a lot to women. We've got to put women in leadership positions. We have to recognize that the world will be a better place when you actually look at it in terms of the productivity side. If the world today were to have the same kind of resources for women as you have for men, you will be able to increase the GDP of the world by 26%. And in case of Africa, that GDP will go up by an additional 12%. So it makes sense, in economic sense, to invest in women. The thing that I must say that has actually impacted me so much is when I look at the issue of women, and Africa went through structural adjustment programs, and many people lost jobs and so on. It's actually the women that kept the economies of Africa actually going. Most of the businesses you find in Africa today, 80–90% of them are small and medium-sized enterprises. They're actually owned by women. But that's where the challenge really is, that the women don't have access to finance. If you look at the amount of financing gap that women have, it's roughly anything about $42 billion in terms of financing for businesses of women in Africa today. And if you take agriculture, that is probably about another $12 billion of financing gap for businesses of women. So, if women we know pay back on their loans, 98% pays back on their loans. So what sense does it make that you're telling me that you're not going to be lending to women that pay back 98% of their loans? And I'm sure that the balance of the 2% is probably their husbands on the way paying that tell them that they shouldn't go and pay it. But the point I'm trying to make is this: women are bankable. The women pay back their loans. We have to develop new financing instruments that allows us to lend more to women, not based on collateral, because if there's nothing better than the collateral of your repayment rate, which is 98%. And I'm delighted we have on the panel with the minister from Canada, where we're really talking about the feminist policy in Canada, and I'm very supportive. I was there, we were talking. So the point I want to make is that let us rejig and tune the financial markets towards women. And that's why for us, at the African Development Bank, everything we do is to make sure that we do that. Three things I would say. First, in terms of loans. We give quite a lot of financing through intermediary finance institutions, and we hold banks accountable to what they do for women. For example, we just did Fidelity Bank in Nigeria, $50 million, 30% of it will go to businesses of women. Raw Bank in the development in the DRC Congo for $15 million, 50% of that will go towards women businesses. The Development Bank of Rwanda, we have $21 million, 30% of it to go to women. And Kenya Commercial Bank with $99 million, 50% of it to go to women. And even in Mali, with the Development Bank of Mali, 30 million euros with almost 15–20% of it going to women. So what I'm trying to say is that we are going to be holding commercial finance institutions accountable in terms of their delivery for the businesses of women. I'll come back later to talk about AFAWA, but the point I want to really say here is that I think we've got to change the way financial markets work. We've got to trust women businesses better. We have to support them with technical assistance, but we have to let them grow. Because when Africa gets the issue of women right, it will finally have gotten its development right.
AFAWA, affirmative financing action for women in Africa, we will definitely come back to that as an initiative that was launched by the African Development Bank in 2016. I want to borrow from Nelson Mandela at this stage. If you want to change the world, help women. And that brings me to Secretary Al-Gabra. If you can give us a sense of what Canada is doing in terms of policy and where women are being put at the center of policy.
Thank you for your question, and I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'm grateful for the honor and the opportunity to share the stage with so many distinguished people here today. Our government got elected on a mandate of driving inclusive growth. And inclusive growth means every member of society should benefit from that growth. And if you look at data and statistics, you'll see that women have, relatively speaking, have benefited less than men with economic development. So our Prime Minister has led the charge from day one by choosing to have 50% of his cabinet women, and ensuring that women are empowered in Canadian society. This is not only the right thing to do, but it is the economically reasonable thing to do. When you have 50% of your population underrepresented in gaining some of the growth benefits that we all share as a society, you have a significant portion of your society underutilized. And in order for us to achieve that goal, we've brought in a lot of new policies. For example, we've invested in daycare, making sure that women have access to daycare so they can go back to the workplace after giving birth. We've invested, or we've modified our maternity leave policies. So if the husband shares some of the maternity leave, they can actually have a longer maternity leave for both of them, but only if the other partner takes part in the maternity leave. We are investing in women entrepreneurs. You know that there are, if you look at the large corporations in Canada, there are more CEOs of the name of David than women. That is a significant and stark point and a reminder to us that women are really underrepresented. And one of the things we did, we passed a new law that requires corporations to be transparent about their board of directors and to put a plan how they can diversify members of their board of directors, including women. So now we're requiring large corporations to ensure that they have a plan, not necessarily a quota, but to expect them that they're reaching out to women and including them in their board of directors. So we've been doing a lot of changes. I don't want to forget this. The status of women used to be a small department. Now we've upscaled it into a full ministry. Every item that the government passes, from a budget to new policies, have to be analyzed through a gender-based analysis. So we've made a lot of changes, and we believe that it's the best thing for our society.
And we want to hear more of those game-changing policies a little later in the conversation. Ibukun, let me come to you now as chairperson of First Bank of Nigeria. When I introduced you in the green room, which is the room we have a conversation in before we walk onto stage, you then came out fiercely and said, yes, but I'm also an entrepreneur. And it's that passion that I want to unlock right now. As an entrepreneur, share your experience.
Thank you very much to African Development Bank for the invitation. Well, I started my first business just after my 25th birthday, and for the past 30 years, I have built a manufacturing group in furniture and security systems. And it was a time and a season when, as a girl, so to speak, I had no qualification whatsoever to get any kind of financial support. I literally had to grow my business organically. And the first time I got a tangible loan, I was already a business that was doing more than $1 million in turnover. And the bank suddenly took notice. And there were banks that wouldn't even open an account.
But you were doing multi-million turnover,
yes,
before you got your first loan.
Yes. So I think things are a lot better than they were, because there's some level of realization of the fact that only a foolish businessman locks up 50% of his asset and expect the resources from using the other 50% to support the 100%. And that's literally what the world is doing. And the African woman has been entrepreneurial for decades, for generations. Because even in the days where the men were the big farmers, whatever they did, the wife was the commercial part of it. And they've always added value. And we have a structural defect in how we have structured financing in a way that plays against the women. And unlocking that structural defect in order to empower the women who have a natural propensity for commercial activities or industrialization and building companies and creating value will change the face of Africa. And because the woman represents so much more value for her family. I mean, there's a report that says women spend about 90% of their income, the money they generate on their families. Men spend 30%. So we need to find out what they do with the other 70%. But essentially, the important thing is, if you really want to grow the African families, and you can't grow communities except you go down to growing the families, you need to make the woman a critical component of our financial system, such that you will be sure that she will engage her children, she will educate them, she will empower them, she will support the building of the community. She's far more stable, dedicated, loyal to systems than, no offense meant to the men. I'm a mother of boys. I have 3 boys and a husband, so this is not anything against the men. It's just the facts of where we are. And the reality is we must find ways to empower every young girl and every young woman, first with knowledge, because passion for entrepreneurship is in knowledge. First, we keep them with the right knowledge. 2, we make sure that they have the resource to actualize their dreams and ultimately add to the value of moving our African countries to where we really need them to get to.
So again, we go back to Nelson Mandela. If you want to change the world, help women. Hyatt, trailblazing across the Middle East. Weigh in with your female perspective.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is my first time in South Africa, and during my birthday month, so I call it birthday month because I celebrate the AIF Day of the month. And thank you for inviting me for such an important session. Currently, I'm also the Chief Scientific Advisor for His Excellency Dr. Bandar Hajjar of the Islamic Development Bank for Science, Technology, and Innovation. I'm a scientist, and also, as you mentioned, thank you for your wife to be here. And I also want to thank you, my father. I came from Mecca, from Saudi Arabia, and I really wanted to be a scientist. So I persuaded my father, gently, to send me abroad to England and America to become a pharmacologist, to be biotechnologist. Being a scientist also gave me a full picture of the complex world and how I can see science really bring benefit, not just only to myself, also to the world. And that is the strategy really we're doing in the Islamic Development Bank. We believe, as the Islamic Development Bank, we are a multilateral bank. We serve 1.6 billion 57 countries, and all our member countries are developing countries. So you can imagine the challenges we face. So it's very important to us to empower women to become financially independent and youth. And we're doing that practically, globally, and locally through quality education, scholarship program, empowering women to become scientists because we lack women scientists and that's crucial to the world, encouraging women to become engineers, encouraging women to be confident and also role model, encouraging women also to be, they can create their own market to become entrepreneurs. And we started 2 initiatives, which is really very much empowering women. One of them is called Engage Platform, a digital platform. And it's a great way to reach women, even in rural area, to give them that platform, secure, to exchange their ideas, to transfer technology, and to have this ecosystem of empowerment. The second one we created, to keep that sustainable, you need money. So we created a fund called Transform Fund, $500 million to really empower small businesses, especially in science, innovation, and technology, to address challenges in food security, quality education, renewable energy, water, infrastructure, and health. And also, we already have in this program by empowering women who even doesn't read and write, are in villages in the rural area, to become solar engineer. Just only by empowering 10 women, and we give them all the equipment, they transform villages to 142 houses, 1,000 people forever, they have electricity. And also we are coming with an initiative because we believe every single woman has the right for the diagnosis for breast cancer and cervical cancer. And we have this
very worthy cause. Daphne, I'm going to bring you into the conversation here. You have unlocked money from development finance institutions. Talk to me about the journey.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank the African Development Bank because without their funding, I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't have created Kalahari Manganese, which outside of debt is worth about 18 billion rand from scratch. I'm not a trust fund baby.
It's worthy of a round of applause. 18 billion rand from scratch.
I started my business by accident because I was a community worker. And I was brought in by a group of men who wanted to start a project. And they wanted me to structure their project and not invite me as a partner. And they gave me a small stake because they didn't have money. And because I was such a small percentage of their business, I couldn't change what I wanted to change in the mining sector. I grew up in a rural town called Pilgrim's Rest, where gold was discovered in 1860. And I knew that pre-Beijing, post-Beijing, we can talk about financial inclusion of women, but if we actually don't lead, we are not going to get there. And I looked at South Africa, I realized that we are well endowed with mineral resources, and therefore there were 2 legs to empowerment and transformation. It was the mining sector and the agricultural sector. Right across Africa, agribusiness, or we are well endowed with natural resources. I started my business in 2001. I actually had a house that was worth 120,000 rand. I would pay my car 1 month and my house the next day. I was called a slow payer by the banks, and therefore I couldn't get money from the commercial banks. We had something in South Africa called the ITC. I was on the ITC as someone who's not credit worthy, but I raised 12.5 million from Investec. I did a pre-feasibility study. I went to the African Development Bank and the IDC. The African Development Bank gave me $150 million, and the IDC gave me 4.5 billion.
Was the process easy?
I think I just want to take from what President Adesina and my sister here from First Bank said, that how we bring up our children is actually very important. Credit committees, by their very nature, is men with black suits, and therefore, they see risk when they look at women. In my case, for instance, people were prepared to actually fund me but there was a rider where they would say, we will fund Kalahadi Manganese as long as Stephanie Mashile-Nkosi ceases to become the executive chair of the business. It was my vision to actually start the business. But having said that, I also realized that in the mining sector, people were talking about skills, that there were no women in mining. I can tell you now that when I started, I have women with 18 to 20 years experience. They had my mining company is an integrated mining company. I do not export jobs. I mine, I beneficiate in the country. I've built the largest manganese sinter plant in terms of output in the world. With
Clarify your revenue line again. Your revenue line, 18, was it 80 or 18 billion?
18 billion.
18 billion.
Yes. I've spent 9.5 billion into infrastructure, rents, into infrastructure on the ground. I went into the Northern Cape, there was nothing. I've built a mine, I've built a sinter plant, I've built an ore preparation plant, I've built a rail that is 18.6 kilometers roads. I pulled electricity 74 kilometers away. I actually
Daphne,
pulled
it's an
water
inspiring story, and I'm coming back again to drill down into knowledge nuggets that you're going to share with us, not only here in the room, but across the African continent to the 48 countries that we're broadcasting to. Talk to me about affirmative financing action for women in Africa, AFAWA, launched by the African Development Bank in 2016.
Well, I think we should put our hands together for these women because the successful women give you the inspiration to do more. When Mashile-Nkosi was saying, you know, the African Development Bank trusted you and gave you $150 million. And when you were talking about the transaction, when you had to redo the ownership structure, the bank actually stood with you to make sure that you were in control of your business.
Yes.
You know, and here you are today, one of the topmost people in the world dealing with manganese business. We were talking we met in the hallway, and she told me, well, you know, you gave me $150 million, and I'm going to pay you out, you said, next year?
Next year, March.
You see that?
Ahead of time.
Yes, nothing gets better than that. Especially, sorry, men, I hope you can pay us back faster like that. That would be great. Now, what we're trying to do with the affirmative finance action is essentially look at the fact that how do we change the financial system to be able to lend more to women? And so you have a situation wherein we feel that the issue is risk. People say, you know, you walk into the bank, Mr. Awoshika also walks into the bank and they say they see risk because everybody's wearing dark suits and stuff like that. They don't see the opportunity. They don't see the ingenuity and stuff like that. And so you can imagine if this happens to you at your level, what happens to women who actually dominate a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses who don't, you know, probably even have education. I walked into, I was on a plane one day, I came off the plane, there was this woman and she had to sign her name. And they gave her a pen and she held the pen like this. And the guy was laughing at her. And then, you know, she looked around and said, well, you can laugh all you want. I have a son that I'm training to be a medical doctor in London. And so just so that you know that women feel intimidated sometimes to walk into banks because the systems aren't set up to be quite receptive to them. So what we are doing with affirmative finance action is as follows. We believe that we need to de-risk lending to women businesses. So we are working now to set up a guarantee facility that is $300 million US. That guarantee facility of $300 million will leverage 10 times. That will be at least $3 billion that we can leverage for businesses of women, you know, in Africa. We're going to go, this is not about just giving money to another business. It's about how you take the entire financial system to pay attention to the businesses of women. Now, if I put in $300 million, and we're talking to Canada, we're talking to Netherlands and several about this, I know that, you know, that guarantee is not going to be called. If 98% of them are paying back, that is something that is really good. So we want to tilt the financial markets towards lending to women businesses. Secondly, We want accountability in terms of lending to women. How are we going to do that? We are going to set up at the African Development Bank a rating system that's going to rate and rank all banks and financial institutions on the continent based on volume of lending to women, based on the rates that they are lending, and based on the impact that they are lending. So if you came to us and you said, well, African Development Bank, we want you to give us lines of credit, just like I just told you in the beginning, this time we're going to ask you, how much have you done for women lately? So that accountability is going to be there. We're tilting the system towards that. The third thing that we are trying to do with the affirmative finance action as well is to help the banks, front office, back end of the office, to be able to prepare themselves to understand businesses of women, and also to provide technical assistance to businesses of women. I can tell you just a story just to make my point, why I really believe this is serious when I became president of African Development Bank. In 1990, I flew from Lagos on a plane to Abidjan. You have all these women, they were selling, pine, they were selling this...
I can't help you.
No. It's in French, but I know what I'm saying. But it's textile, you know, this kind of nice bazin textile. We got on the plane. I had with me just a computer, this old compact, the one you pick up that looks like a suitcase, right? I got on the plane, and the women were the same sizes, right? They were all like this, very fat on the plane. But actually, they had baskets on their head. As they took off the baskets, they started taking the tape off. They had actually wrapped the bales of clothing around themselves because they were being overtaxed by the customs people. And so all of...
President Adesina, I thought I was going to have to jump in because of... No, I'm so glad. They were unwrapping themselves. Yeah. I was very worried about where that was going.
No. But the point I was going to make is this. They actually were escaping the customs that were overtaxing them. Then I asked the hostess, please, I'm just trying to put in my luggage into the overhead compartment. She looks at me and she says, how many times do you fly this plane? I say, it depends on where my job takes me. She says, see these women here? They may not be able to read or write. They may have baskets on their head, but they keep us in business because they fly this plane several times a week. So if you don't mind, we'll take your computer downstairs into the hold, free up the space for the women to put in their baskets and all of their clothes. From that moment, I knew that we just had to get financing for these women. And this is exactly what the affirmative finance action for women in Africa is going to do. Unlock the entrepreneurship capacity of women and put our financings behind them. I want them to be like this, you know, like the chair of Ms. Uska here, and like you running your company. We have to do that. And I think we should connect folks like you also to them, because women-to-women value chain connection is very important to grow those businesses.
So, President Adesina, I was very complimentary about your vision and execution this morning on the opening plenary. So I'm going to put it back to you in terms of scale, speed, and synergy when it comes to the financing initiatives. What timelines are you setting for us?
Well, we're already working on it. You know, I spent 4 days, Minister Bilbo was supposed to be here with us from Canada. Canada is being FinDev is part of it. We're working already on it, and we've already, we believe that by very early next year, we'll be able to roll this out. Believe me, I can think. It's a privilege for us to be on this panel. This is the first panel here that we are in the minority, both of us, in this meeting.
Welcome to the new world.
But
and that's the way it should be. You know, I think we need to really fast track everything that has to do with making women businesses succeed on this continent.
You've given me the timeline, sir. Early next year, I'll hold you to it.
Well, I've got Vanessa Munga here, who's our director for, so that's your KPI.
There we go. We've got a timeline, deadline, and as a broadcaster, we can monitor. Secretary Al-Gabra, come back to, now let's move to innovative financing mechanisms to close that $42 billion gap that we were speaking about. Give me some solutions. The next half of this panel discussion is about solutions.
Let me talk about some stuff that we're doing in Canada and some stuff that we're doing internationally. We have an agency called BDC, which is a governmental agency that is meant to support small and medium-sized businesses with advice, with loans, with grants, etc. we've mandated them with a dedicated budget to work with women entrepreneurs who are looking for advice, counsel, grants, tips on how not only to sell domestically, but to sell abroad. So there's a specific mandate with a significant budget to assist women entrepreneurs. One other anecdote that I want to share with you is we're focusing, like Africa, on combating climate change. And we're investing in clean technology. Within Natural Resources Canada, we have a program we called it a Women Challenge, where we opened up the application forms for Canadian women from across the country to apply with their innovative idea for clean tech. We selected 5 women. Those 5 women now are supported for 3 years within an incubator, and the winner, there will be a winner at the end of the 3-year period, will be given a $1 million grant to build her business in clean technology. So not only are we supporting women entrepreneurs, but again, we're finding new innovative ways to combat climate change. On the international front, we've done our first ever this year women trade delegation. Typically, trade delegations are made up of men, and there are the odd women here and there. We had an all-women trade delegation go to Europe, build connections with their counterparts, with other businesses, open up trade channels for them to empower them to make sure that they're able to benefit from these trade agreements that we have. On the international development front, and the President talked about Minister Bibo, we have a feminist international aid policy that is focused on empowering women, on helping them become more educated, more entrepreneurs, take leadership of their own business, because we know, like mentioned earlier, when women succeed, they spend their money on education for their children, on their households, and that money goes back into the economy. So that also is an excellent tool to combat poverty.
Buchan, let's talk about commercial banks. How can commercial banks make it easier to lend to women and fast-track, accelerate the progress in this space?
Okay, I'll tell you some of what we've done. I'll share the First Bank story, and I'd like to bring some examples from Bank of Industry, because I've seen some friends of mine from Bank of Industry in the house.
We're all for examples.
Yeah.
Tangible examples.
Okay, so what we've done at First Bank is, as an entrepreneur, when I became the chairman from 1st of January 2016, having lived through that over the lifetime of building my business, I knew where the gaps were. First is the women's knowledge base in terms of building personal wealth in a way that made them qualified to even get loans, their understanding of financial matters and all of that. So we created a program which is called the First Gem Woman. Now, on the First Gem, we're aggressive about helping women to understand what is involved in building personal wealth, in building their money and investing it in their business, in being qualified to take opportunities in the financial services sector. And one interesting thing, in 24 months, we've had over 40,000 women and a cycle of over 26 billion naira within those women. Money that they never thought they had.
I'm going to inject another part of the equation here, because scale up, speed up, synergize. Let's take that and extrapolate the story to how you are engaging with other commercial banks across Africa. So it's not just a First Bank Nigeria story.
Okay, now that's probably a little more complex, but for us, because we have banks in other parts of Africa, the experiments that we're carrying out in Nigeria, we will eventually execute in the rest of Africa. So that's the goal. But beyond that is we're partnering with other banks, because we actually partner with Bank of Industry. As a matter of fact, on the 23rd of November, we're going to launch a loan package for the entrepreneurial women that are part of the First Gem community. We spent the first 2 years teaching them financial literacy, and then now we're going into being able to give them money, between money we receive from Bank of Industry and part of money that CBN strategically has allowed us from reserves with them to use for that purpose. We're building scale, and we're building in stages.
So partnerships are definitely on the horizon with
Partnerships
other commercial
are
banks.
key. Knowledge is key. I can tell you that. You know, we're quick to jump into, let's just give the women money. But in my experience as an entrepreneur and sitting as the chair of a bank, I can tell you that if you don't first empower them with the right knowledge, they're also vulnerable to losing the money in some other ways. So we've invested in the knowledge process, and we continue to scale up on that. And then we are giving the money out. One thing I wanted to refer to about what Bank of Industry is doing. I mean, the largest part of the population in our country is at the bottom of the pyramid. So you've got these women who strive so hard. But you, in real terms, 10,000 naira, 5,000 naira is a lot of money for them. That's nothing. It's peanuts in real terms if I convert to dollars. But they don't have it to inject into their business. And so they've structured a system where they're giving some, it's little money, but because I've worked with missionaries and seen what little money can do in the lives of women, they are carrying that, executing that across the country. And my faith is the more you empower these women, they will multiply that money and increase the scale of their business. And once they do that in the first tranche, they become qualified to get a higher volume of money to inject in their business. So it's a long-term project. It cannot be short-term. It has the component of knowledge. You must teach the women the parts they do not know. And then the banks must be engaged in giving low-cost money, because that's where banks like ADB come in, because the kind of money that they release to commercial banks for that purpose can get to the consumer at a cheaper rate than money that is raised traditionally by commercial banks through the normal deposit and all of that, because it's more expensive money. So all the banks realize right now you can't play with those markets. So we're finding innovative solutions to solve the problem.
So we need a bank boardroom to solve the acceleration of investing in women across Africa. Hyatt, what works best in your experience when it comes to financing women entrepreneurs?
It's a great question. Being sit in many different panels within UNESCO, and especially empowering women in STEM education and entrepreneurs. So all women around the world facing a similar situation. So the best thing is really when you want to empower women to become entrepreneurs, you will really understand its own world and its own ecosystem. First of all, we are really in an Islamic Development Bank after impact. You can build a school, but how much is really accessible to many different women? What is the quality of education? Is it sustainable? How about when it's in a rural area, when little girls, they cannot even find their hygiene pant to go to school and they drop a school? We'll give a woman a chance to come back after she become pregnant. Do you have age preference? Do you have qualification preference? Because I believe we lack women to be in a leadership role in science and innovation, direction of research. Because if we have more women in that level, we won't have fast cars. I'm sorry to say that, guys. We won't have a laser killer beam. We wouldn't have a nuclear weapon. We will have, like, for example, when a bullet was created, it was created by a man for protection, which is understandable, but the bullet shield created by a woman also for the soul protection. When airbags were designed, first, it's designed only by the decision maker, by all of the men, so they only look after the driver, and end up a lot of life lost for women and children. Not until the woman became a decision maker rules. She thought about the driver, has her nature, and everybody behind. So that's why the air side bag created. So with the Islamic Development Bank, money is part of the equation, but we need to create the whole services. We create for them as like an academy. How do they do their business model? Who will be in their team? How they can access the investor? What will be the cash flow? How we can carry and visit them to see if they really need another empowerment of another staff. When they will have an exit strategy. Also, we create IP unit within Islamic Development Bank to protect their own ideas, because we want to also to protect the investor. The culture of innovation. So you really, and within the Transform Fund, we're not just only after successful story. We have 4 different types of funding. First of all is a proof of the concept idea. And imagine like when we have started the fund, the majority of people, they need somebody to believe in them. So even if it's like a money, we don't have a return, but for us it's a true investment. The second part for scaling up, and that's really crucial because sometimes it's very difficult to find B investor compared with A investor. And the third one, commercialization. How many of us thought from the beginning how we're going to encourage women? If I become an engineer, I'm going to design renewable energy can benefit, or I can design a purifying system for water, can save 3 million children die every year because of the lack of. And the fourth part of the fund, which is very important, capacity building. Anyone, any religion, any nationality, think about the strategy of empowering their own community. You know, women education, health for women, anything for the ecosystem, they're welcome. And that's why we have interest from 100 countries. We have about 4,300 interest. And we increased, and this is I'm very happy to say and to announce it first time, we increased the interest for women to become entrepreneurs through the Transform Fund from 9% to 40%.
From 9% to 40%.
40%.
Daphne, you stated you're not a trust fund baby. You've built this successful business. You're now playing in the major leagues. You've managed to access financing from finance institutions. You mentioned the African Development Bank. What is your advice to young women entrepreneurs who are tuning into this broadcast, who want to follow in your footsteps, who want to make a success of their entrepreneurial businesses, SMEs? What is your advice to them?
My advice to them is that it's doable. It's not going to be easy. Remember that you are not a banker, you are not a lawyer, you are not an accountant, you are an entrepreneur, and therefore you are an outlier. People will differ with you. They will not understand your vision. Do not allow them to move away from your vision. The second point is that I would want to, as someone who's gone through this journey, is to say to the financial institutions, as you have these policies, President Adesina, transfer them to those that actually assist you. When the lawyers, the accountants, because I can tell you now, the cost of financing becomes more expensive simply because the law firms, the accounting firms don't share the same vision as the African Development Bank. And for me, that's the experience that I've actually gone through. Going back to young people is to say, you will be called names, knowledge is power, understand your competitors or competition. I can actually give examples. When we were actually given the licenses, there was 9 companies that were given the same license to mine manganese. But why were we different? I was different because I knew that everybody who had the license was a man, he will be funded, and therefore I'll be right at the bottom of the pit. And I chose to do it differently. I built a mine, a beneficiation plant, but I also wanted to own the trading company that trade the commodity, understand the international market, so that I actually don't become a price taker. I determine the international price. If you look at the product that I produce, I'm the only one in the world that will put 4 million tons of manganese sinter in the world. And therefore, in terms of the London Metal Exchange, there is no price of sinter. It therefore means Kalahari manganese will determine the international price.
So I'm going to take the liberty of marginalizing the men on the panel for a moment. I'm going back to Hyatt. I'm going to ask you your advice to young women entrepreneurs out there. Remember, we've promised to take this conversation into action. And when we come to our closing round, I'll be asking everybody how they're taking the conversations from the stage into the next 3 days. But first, Hyatt, your advice to young women wanting to trailblaze in business across Africa.
My advice comes from my own personal experience. When I went to, after I did my study at Cambridge and I went to Harvard, I had no clue how to start a business. But I have this passion, how I can put my ideas in hand of the communities. So that was the first thing my professor asked me to go to Harvard Business School. It was so painful for 3 months. I felt like the most stupid person in the world because it's out of my comfort zone. I have to study different language. But I did that because I need to be more connected to reality. And by doing that, my invention with my co-invention and my co-business, we won the first prize from Harvard, first prize from 100K MIT. And Bill Gates gave us millions of pounds to create that diagnostic tool to reach 5 million people to cure them for liver dysfunction. So my advice here, and for a long time, nobody wanted to be in my team. They thought I'm crazy, my ideas doesn't fit within the scientific, because it's social innovation. So my advice, you are amazing, you are confident, you're capable, follow with your passion, and emotion is the great compass for human great innovation. So follow that.
Ibukun, you know I'm coming to you to ask you to add your advice.
Well, for me first, there's absolutely no business that you can't do as a girl. My father brought up girls and forgot to tell us that we were girls. So I think that's worked for us, because when people say, weren't you afraid of anything? I never thought about it, because he didn't remember to tell me there was something I couldn't do. So my first advice would be, there is absolutely nothing that you cannot do. Your ability to deliver value has no gender bias. It's about your vision, your commitment, your diligence, and you must be ready to do the work. 2, don't let anybody ever make you apologize for being African, because there's nothing wrong with you. We have a great continent, we're great people, we have talents, we have ability, there are opportunities staring us in the face despite our challenges as a continent. And if you're young, the future is yours. So whatever you see now that you do not like, your responsibility is to step out and do whatever you need to do to change it. And when you step out and you show yourself, you will find help. One thing I know is when people are looking for talents, they don't bother to worry about gender. Whoever can deliver that they see, male or female, that's who they go with. So when you know what you're doing and you're bold enough to speak out for yourself, people will stand up to support you. And when it comes to your countries, look for the needs. Those are your opportunities. Find solutions for the things that people complain about every day, and find the ones that speak to you. Because every opportunity you see is not yours. There's certain opportunities that you're best equipped for. Your degree has nothing to do with what you can do. I studied chemistry in university. What's that got to do with the life that I live? And I started building a furniture manufacturing business from the age of 25. So my chemistry degree means science. I can think, I can reason, I can apply myself, I can ask questions. That's all education does. It's meant to open your mind, but it doesn't limit your ability to take on challenges. So make this continent great, because we can, and we have more than enough people. I was at a conference, if you just give me a minute, in Canada in June, and the deputy minister for Montreal said they just spend a lot of money, asked one of the biggest consulting firms to study the areas for potential growth in their province. And they were shocked by the result. When the result came back, there were only 2 areas they had to pay attention to: women and young people. Those 2 things, Africa has in abundance, but we're foolish enough not to invest in them and make them the center of our strategy. That's what we've got to do. Thank you.
So in the opening plenary session this morning, we promised you that the Africa Investment Forum is not a talk shop. It is about execution. And you've heard the phrase transactions, transactions, transactions mentioned over and over again. I'm going to spend the last 11 minutes of this discussion asking, as I said, the panelists what they're going to do over the next 3 days in terms of driving transactions, in terms of investing in women for accelerated growth. President Adesina.
Well, I think what Ibukunsen and also Nkosi and others said is exactly why we are investing in this particular space. You know, I was in Berlin, and I think some of the young people that were here were out there just a week ago. And they came up with a great plan, which is called Entrepreneurship Development Program, in which, oh, should we write it? Can you, I can see you over there. You know, and what they did is a plan wherein they would start up their own businesses. And they want banks, financial institutions like us, to take risk on them. And I said we have to invest in hope, because the young people are the hope of this continent. But that hope cannot continue to be deferred into the future. We have to make sure that we invest in them today. And so what we've got to first do is the financial institutions have to have confidence in Africa's youth and take a risk on them. Look, if you're 24 or 25 when you started your business, I'm glad they didn't ask you for 40 years of tax receipts before you could get access to it. If you walk into a bank and you're a young person, they will ask you the same thing. You know, give us tax receipt for 30 years. Who cares about your 30 years? Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, these are young people. The ideas matter. We cannot just continue to let our young people waste away, because I've already said it, the future of Africa's young people doesn't lie in Europe. It doesn't lie also at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. It was lying in Africa, growing very well, where we are providing resources to support them. I'll give you an example of one young lady who inspired me a lot. We supported Kigali, Rwanda Institute of Technology, Kigali Institute of Technology. And there's this lady there, Clarice Ngabarisa, who got a master's from that university. And that's why we're going to invest as a bank more in the IT sector for the jobs of the future. She got a master's degree with Carnegie Mellon University, world-class program. She was walking and jogging in Kigali. President Kagame was jogging in the opposite direction. And she said to him, oh, I want to talk to the president. They said, no, you can't. The soldiers said, no, you can't. President said, okay, come by. What do you want to talk to me about? He said, Mr. President, thank you for sending me to school and letting me get world-class education in ICT technology. But I want to tell you something. I have created a business, and I need you to put seed funding, just a small amount of money. The president asked her to come to his office. He put in seed money into that. And then the president told me she disappeared. Not too long after, she appeared again and said, Mr. President, I need to see you because I'm 27 years old, and I just sold that business that you put money to for $10 million US. And that is the kind of thing that happens when we invest in the youth. And I hope other African presidents can jog at 8 o'clock at night and meet a lot of young people.
So President Adesina, yeah. We are running out of time, sir, and I have to put back to you the question. Will women take center stage in some of the conversations that you will be having over the next 3 days?
Yeah, the women already have center stage. All I'm just trying to say is that there are all these successful women you have up here. Our job is to make sure that we have young people. We have young people here for this particular investment forum. We want them to be like them. You know, so we've created a space. It's going to be a big session where they're going to pitch their businesses to investors. And all I'm trying to say is that catch them young. Believe in them, invest in them. We've got to open that space. And the last thing I will say is that new instruments. As a bank, we want to grow our investment in private equity funds managed by women. You know, we invested in a fund that's called Alitia Fund. We put in $15 million into Alitia Fund. They're all women fund managers, and they will be supporting the businesses of women. Access to finance matters, long-term finance matters, and affordable finance matters. And you have confidence as a business person when you walk into somebody taking private equity position in your company, and you are also a private equity firm managed by women. So those kind of conversations are going to go on as we are in this particular space. But we must not forget the biggest thing on infrastructure are contracts. And the question is, you have women engineers, you got women architects, you got women, people all over the place. We have to have also an affirmative action that allows governments to ensure that big parts of this contract also are given to women-owned companies, because that's where the biggest money is.
I think we need a round of applause there. Thank you very much, President Adesina. Secretary Al-Gabra, I'm coming to you, sir. Taking the conversation forward off the stage into the next 3 days, What is your objective?
So I can share with you a couple of things that we're working on. Part of our feminist international assistance policy is that in the coming years, 50%, at least 50% of our development assistance will go to sub-Saharan Africa. And most of it will be focused on empowering girls and women. The other thing that we're doing, in fact, today, we are signing an MOU with the bank. FinDev is a new innovative financial instrument that's signing an MOU with the African Development Bank to work on a program that works on empowering women and combating climate change. So this is another real example of how we're going to be working together.
This was signed today?
Will be signed.
You'll be signing
will be signed today.
Transaction, transaction, transaction. I can't ask for more. Sorry, I didn't mean to carry on.
And I want to say is that we also need to, in addition to assistance, we need to start talking about investment and business. And that's why I'm here on behalf of international trade to talk to our counterparts in Africa about investment, about increasing interaction, economic interaction, about investing in the future of our youngsters, our women in Africa.
Ibukun, are you taking the First Bank of Nigeria's story forward in this forum in terms of women front and center?
Actually, what I've decided to do, which I've been working on, I'm actually going to speak to Mr. Adesina at some point while I'm here, is in the last few months, I've been developing a project which is, I wrote a book called The Girl Entrepreneur, and it's become quite a bestseller all around, but it's the story of 25 Nigerian female entrepreneurs, because I'm documenting the women, what they're doing, how they're doing it, the learnings and all of that, and using that to inspire other women. So I then decided to start a platform that's called The Girl Entrepreneur, but a Pan-African platform with which, knowing what I know and sitting where I sit, using that platform to fill the knowledge gap that prepares the women to be in a position that they know all they need to know about how to get the money, but not only get it, but get it successfully, and then build successful, scalable businesses across Africa. We can't do the one, the two, the three. We have a volume issue. We've got so many people, so we have to do this with multitudes of people at the same time. So that's what I'm working on. That's, for me, is the priority for the next 5 years.
Hayat.
Thank you. I consider the 3 days as a platform. For me, as a platform is a great way of connecting the dots, transfer technology, find your matchmaker, and also how we can co-invest certain initiatives together. So already this morning we met with our governor from Niger, and we have something we call Transformers Roadshow. It's like a Bob Idol. When we go to certain country, we plan that for 1 month to call every single technologist, innovative ideas, even in microfinance, scientists, to come with the solution for their own local communities. I want to empower that. So we found more women than men to come to this type of thing. So first thing we're going to do, we already talked this morning, was an amazing meeting to do that. The first thing we do, a roadshow in Africa in January, because as I mentioned that we are 57 countries, 22 of the 57 from Africa. So Africa means so much to us as well. So for me, this is an amazing platform to connect the dots, to find key role leaders as well, and how we can co-finance initiative towards prosperous and empowering women to be independently financed.
Daphne, what do the next 3 days hold for you?
The next 2 days, how do we strengthen regional women's networks? We have started with my sister. We've launched the Africa CEO Forum Women in Business. We have regional structures where we bring women. I can tell you now that it has assisted me in terms of my own industry to look at how, given the fact that Africa represents 90% of world reserves in terms of manganese, it's South Africa and Gabon owning 90%, and Ghana in West Africa. How do we ensure that we control the international market as women in business in Africa? The second one is that how do we optimize? We're sitting here, we're saying, what is it that we can do in terms of strengthening regional integration? The fact that I'm sitting here, I've built a mine, a sinter plant, I'm exporting the mineral. I'm sitting with a challenge of energy. I am in an area where You have, out of 365 days, you have 360 days of sunshine. I'm looking for a solar plant. I'm looking for African investors, those young people that can actually come with, I have the land, I have the sun in the Northern Cape, I have the offtake, so I need technology and funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to a conclusion in our discussion, investing in women for accelerated growth in Africa. I'd like to thank our audience in the room. I'd also like to thank the audience that has tuned in from 48 countries across the African continent. And I want to conclude with a quote from Madeleine Albright. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, and may we raise them. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.